Works Tasmania, and I will be your moderator today. This session is electrical compliance before, during, and after the job, presented by Mick Dougan from Master Electricians Australia. In recognition of the deep history and culture of this island, we acknowledge Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the original and continuing custodians of the land, sea, and the sky. We acknowledge and pay our respects to all Tasmanian Aboriginal people, all of whom have survived invasion and dispossession, and continue to maintain their identity, culture, and their rights. Please now take a moment to read the following slide about information you'll receive today. Use the chat tab to type any questions you may have. Those questions will be answered during the webinar and also towards the end of the session. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available on WorkSafe Tasmania's YouTube channel towards the end of the month. Now, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our presenter, Mick Dougan, followed with Sean from Master Electricians Australia. Mick has over 25 years in the electrical industry, including running his own contracting business. At MEA, he supports members with safety, environmental, and technical advice, delivers training, and ensures compliance with regulatory standards. Thank you so much, and welcome to the webinar, both of you. Over to you.
Thanks, Sonia. Welcome, everyone. So today we've got talking about electrical compliance, so the legal requirements before, during, and at the completion of a job. We've got Sean Higgins with me here today. He's also an electrician. He's going to help answer any questions that come through. I've just added this table at the start. So this is basically, unfortunately, we don't have a national license for electricians in Australia, but this is available on our website. So basically, it's the state you're in. So the home state, you've got the home state at the top. So for us, it's Tasmania. And then you can scroll across the state you wish to work in and the what you have to do about that. So say we want to work in Queensland, sole traders get automatic mutual recognition, but if you are a company, so a contracting company, you would need a new application to do so. So that is available on our website. Just wanted to add that there for a bit of information. And we'll scroll to the next one. So webinar is in 3 parts. First one, legalities to factor in prior to sending your electrician to a job site. So, is your tradesperson's license current? Quite easy to check this. You can do it on the CBOS Electrical License Register. Just go to their website. You can scroll into their details and make sure the people you are employing as an electrician, their license is current. That is up to you as a PCBU or employer to do so. It is your responsibility. It's also up to the tradesman to make sure their license has not expired. So we've come across instances at Master Electricians where licenses have actually expired and people are doing work as an electrician with no current license. So it is a big deal. First step, if you're going to employ someone, make sure their license is current. CBOS also require you to have a license register. So this is a good idea to maintain anyway, and it's as a contractor, if you're employing anyone, you need to have a license register. The register needs to include license details, the period of employment, the qualifications, competencies, and continuing professional development, or CPD. So we'll get to CPD in the next slide. But yeah, you need to have that, and it needs to be readily available if an inspector requires that. So you need to have it on hand. It can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet or a table in Microsoft Word, but yeah, add all the license details, set up expiry reminders to make sure licenses aren't going to expire, and you can keep up to date with that. Good idea to add other training into it, so first aid training, CPR, low voltage rescue, EWP licenses, and you should be doing that for all your workers. CPD, hopefully everyone out there is aware of CPD requirements in Tasmania. So CBOS, who are the regulator, they are responsible for licensing for electrical workers, and you are all required to do CPD as part of your license requirements. So 12 points a year, 36 points over the 3 years of your license. There's various ways to get CPD points. So at Master Electricians, we regularly run webinars. They're worth 1 point. It's basically 1 point per hour. There's a whole events calendar on CBOS. You can check that out, see what comes up in your area. You can filter it by electricians only. And there's various ways. If you're in an industry association, that's worth 1 point a year. If you're reading, subscribe to newsletters, that's 1 point a year, up to a maximum of 3 per year. So there's various ways to, but you need to also hold a record of that. So you should be recording that all. And the training provider needs to provide you with a certificate. Don't leave it till your license is about to expire. CBOS have cancelled licenses before for people not fulfilling their CPD requirements. So keep on top of it. As soon as you've done the training, you enter that into your calendar or however you're recording it, and keep up to date with that. Is your tradesperson competent? So just because you have employed a licensed electrician does not mean they're competent to do the task. It is up to you to do regular competency audits on your workers to make sure they are competent and able to do the task you're sending them to. So, for instance, a newly qualified electrician doing his first switchboard upgrade, I would say he's not going to be competent in that. He needs to be shown that, or he needs to show you that he is competent to do that. Same with someone undertaking a solar install for the first time. I dare say they're not going to be competent in that. So regular competency audits on all your workers to make sure they're up to date and can do the task they're being sent to do is critical. Is your test equipment calibrated and in good working order? So all test equipment, very important for electricians. You need to do pre-inspection checks on your test equipment. So you should be checking the leads and the probes. They should be calibrated. You've got to know the limitations of your instruments as well, and be able to interpret the readings that the test results that are coming through. Sadly, there was a death in South Australia a few years ago, and it was found in the investigation that the electrician had his meter set to DC, not AC. So when he tested with DC, he was getting 0 volts. Unfortunately, he was electrocuted and died, and they found in the investigation his meter set to DC. So you've got to be aware, you've got to be trained in how to use the equipment. You've got to be able to interpret the test results as well. Have any site-specific inductions be completed if required? So WHS regs do state that if you're going to send someone to site, they must have the information, training, and instruction provided to them in an easily understandable way. So you can't just send someone to site and not tell them what they're doing. You've got to sort of let them know, explain exactly what they need to be doing. So other sites may have site-specific inductions as well. You can do them online. There's in-person events, in-person inductions, sorry. I worked in the mines about 15 years ago, and a full day induction just to get on a mine site. Recently did an hour online induction as well. So you've got to be aware of all that. Make sure everyone is up to date with what is required of them. Risk assessment and SWIMS. This is a big one in Australia with WHS legislation. So we might cover SWIMS first. Safe work method statements, or SWIMS, they are legally required for high-risk work. So high-risk work includes working on or near energized electrical equipment. Testing for dead is classed as high-risk work. So you need a SWIMS pretty much for every job we're going to be sent to as an electrician. And then it's other things like working at heights, which is above 2 meters, asbestos, working on or near a road, or high-risk work like that. There is a full list on WorkSafe Tasmania for that. So go check it out. But you should all have SWIMS in your business. SWIMs also need to be consulted with your workers. So you need to run through, they need to understand. It should be written in an easily understandable language that 16-year-old apprentice would know, tradesman with English as a second language. So it's got to be readily understood as well. And then when you're on site, it needs to be accessible and editable. So at Master Electricians, we do provide templates. They are templates only. So you need to make them unique to your business. Take controls out that you think are unnecessary, add controls that you want to add into your business. And then risk assessments. So risk assessments are more your site-specific things. They work in conjunction with SWIMs. A lot of our members will build risk assessments into their job management software. So things like ServiceMate, Simpro, sorry, I'm just going to have a drink, Traderify. A lot of our members will build a risk assessment into the job management software and make it a mandatory step at the start of the job. So when their workers turn up to site, they have to fill in the risk assessment. It makes you think about what the risks are involved in that job, and it also it provides that paper trail for if anything was to happen. So risk assessment differs from SWIMs. It is more site specific. So things like weather or animals in the yard or noise. So what control measures you're going to implement for that. So for noise, you're going to add earplugs or earmuffs. Is consultation required around live work, and are there any significant isolations or outage implications? So the managing electrical risks in the Workplace Code of Practice, Section 5 states the standard steps for isolation are: number 1, consultation. So if you're going to site and you're turning off power, you need to consult with the person in charge of that site. It could be the owner of the business, could be the owner of the house, but you need to consult with them. So commercial inconvenience is not a reason to be working energized. So in consultation with the owner of that site, you need to work out the best way to manage that if you need to de-energize. So you could maybe return after hours to complete the job. As I said, commercial inconvenience is not a reason to work live, and you need to be doing it safely and consulting with the person in charge around any isolations. Okay, that was part 1. We're moving on to part 2. So these are legalities to factor in during a job. Is your PPE adequate? So PPE is the last line of defense. If you're solely relying on PPE, there's something wrong in your safety systems. It comes back to the hierarchy of control. We've got elimination at the top, PPE at the bottom. So ideally, you want to eliminate any risks. That means de-energizing the circuit you're going to work on, isolating the circuit you're going to work on, and or if you're working at heights, working off the ground, you've eliminated that risk. That's not always, we're not always able to do that, so we rely on PPE. And it's things like, a harness or LV gloves as well. The other thing you need to do with PPE, it is your responsibility to provide it to your workers, but you also need to train them in how to use it correctly. So think of a 16-year-old apprentice, first time he's ever seen a harness, you need to train him in how to put it on and how to use it correctly. The other thing you should be doing is inspections of PPE before use. So check your harness, check it's in date, make sure the webbing's all good. Things like LV gloves, you want to do the air pressure test, make sure there's no holes in them as well. Lockout, tag out. This is a big one at Master Electricians lately. So we've been talking to apprentices. I've probably talked to 200 apprentices in the last few months. I'd say only 20% of them have their own lock, which is a really small number. Everyone who is isolating or everyone who's working on a circuit that is isolated should be locking on. You can see that picture there with the 2 locks on. If there's 2 of you working on the circuit, 2 of you should be locking on. 6 of you on the circuit, 6 of you should be locking on. So as I said, I worked in the mines. There was literally 120 of us locking on in the morning, multiple lock boxes, and then 120 of us locking off in the afternoon. That way, no one is at risk of anyone turning the power on. So just a story I heard recently, there was an apprentice fitting off in the corner of the room. His tradesman has come in and said, I'm going to turn the power back on, are you right? And the apprentice has heard something totally different, such as, I'm going to smoke, are you right? He's given it a thumbs up. Tradesman went and turned the power on, and the apprentice got a shock. Luckily, he survived, but it just goes to show, had he been locked on, there was no risk that would have happened. So we're going around, we're publicising this, we've made up a brochure and we're handing that out to wholesalers at the moment, but everyone should have a lock. They should be carrying a lockout kit in their tool bag. The other thing is you want tags as well. So you don't want to just lock on, you need a tag on that. You need your name, phone number, why you've locked off. Apprentice supervision. So comes back to assessing an apprentice electrician's competence. So like I was talking about before, competency audits, you should be doing this on your apprentice as well. You need to monitor them and assess their competence, the awareness of the safety requirements. Can they perform the job to an appropriate technical standard? Can they deal with everyday problems that occur? Do they understand why a task is performed in a certain way or sequence? And can they apply the skills consistently? So it's not just good enough to apply it once. They've got to be consistently applying the skills that to a high standard. All right, so ratio of supervised persons. So for here, I'm going to talk about direct, general, and broad supervision, which are the types of supervision on the next slide in quite a bit more detail. For here, we're talking about the ratio of supervisors to apprentices. So for direct supervision, that is 1-to-1. So that is one tradesman to one apprentice when it's under direct supervision. That may be adjusted following a formal risk assessment, but the formal risk assessment is something that is documented. So there's that record of it as well. And then you look down the bottom, number 2, for general and broad supervision, this would be determined by a completed formal risk assessment as well. So not just good enough to say, yep, they're good. You actually need to document that in a formal risk assessment. All right, so this chart can be found in the Occupational Licensing Supervision of Prescribed Work Code of Practice 2022. So this is only one page of 5 pages. It is a guide on the supervision types. So you can see here phase 1A, 0 to 6. So that's the first 6 months of an apprenticeship. And then we go phase 1B, 7 to 12 months of the apprenticeship. So you can see for a first year, it's basically direct supervision for all. Then it's slowly relaxed for certain tasks, and down to 4th year, broad. You can see testing for LV on an energized circuit, that is still direct supervision. So that is 1-to-1 supervision. I'm going to read the definitions here of what actual direct, general, and broad mean. So direct supervision, when applying direct supervision, the supervisor must provide instruction and direction for tasks to be performed, remain on site within visual contact and/or earshot of the supervised person at all times, continuously monitor the supervised person and review their work practices and standard of work. So this includes oversight of all activities performed by the supervised person, and inspect the supervised person's work prior to commissioning, activating, energizing, or leaving it in service. So as the tradesman, it does come back to you, obviously. It is your responsibility to check all that and make sure it meets Australian standards. For general supervision, so when applying general supervision, the supervisor must provide instruction and direction for tasks to be performed, remain on site and have contact on a periodic basis with the supervised person, Be contactable for assistance or instruction as required, and inspect the supervised person's work prior to commissioning, activating, energizing, or leaving it in service. And down to broad supervision. So broad supervision is only suitable for supervised persons who have demonstrated an ability to conduct the intended work autonomously in a safe and compliant manner. So when applying broad supervision, the supervisor must provide instruction and direction for the task to be performed, make appropriate contact with the supervised person, be contactable for assistance or instruction as required, and inspect the supervised person's work prior to commissioning, activating, energizing, or leaving it in service. So they are the definitions there. Broad, so for direct, obviously you need to be basically right next to them. And with all of those, you need to be providing clear instructions, not just install this circuit. You need to provide the instructions on how to install that circuit. Are you following and revising your swims? So WHS states, the WHS regulations do state that you need to review and revise your control measures as well as your swims. So if something changes on site, you've added new equipment, the weather changes, you should be reviewing and revising both your risk assessment and your swims. As I said before, the swims also need to be accessible and editable on site. So if something does change, you can edit that. You can add a different control measure. And yes, as I said before, they can be electronic versions. You can have paper copies in the van, either. Store them on Google Drive, Dropbox, things like that. Okay, different license scopes, different classes of license in Tasmania. So obviously there we've got the electrical contractor license. That means you can contract for work. You'd also be required to hold insurance for that. And then you've got the electrical practitioner license, so electrician, cable jointer, line worker. And then down to the restricted electrical work license. So things like a plumber doing hot water systems, they can hold a restricted electrical license. Everyone there is still subject to CPD requirements, and they are required to complete CPD for that. Are you performing the work safely? Well, I hope everyone is. So as an electrician, we both have duties. We have duties as the worker, but also the PCBU or employer has duties as well. You need to take reasonable care for your own safety, and the PCBU or employer needs to be giving you the required training as well on safety. Yep. So as electricians, obviously, we work in a dangerous industry, and you must ensure all electrical equipment and property on site is electrically safe as well. So report or repair unsafe situations. So sometimes defective or unsafe electrical work is immediately unsafe. So that's things like if there's no MEN, you must immediately notify both the occupier of the property, so that could be the house owner, the tenant, and your nominated manager for the business. You need to do that in writing to them, obviously a phone call first, but then you need to do that in writing and keep a record of it yourself. The owner of the house, let's just say the owner of the house for this, they're responsible for arranging the repairs. Sometimes you can't force people to pay any money to rectify an unsafe situation. In that case, you need to report it to CBOS. As you can see there on the left, that's an example of the report format. Then your nominated manager, if you're not the nominated manager for the business, must notify CBOS unless the owner agrees to rectify the dangerous situation. So as an electrician, you aren't responsible for fixing defects at your own cost, but you do need to report that correctly and hand that over to CBOS, and then that becomes their responsibility. So in Tasmania, electrical contractors must notify the relevant authority of any serious electrical incident or dangerous event. So obviously can be done via phone or email, but a serious electrical accident includes electrocution or electric shock requiring medical attention. So for electric shock, all electric shocks do require medical attention. If that happens, they need to go get an ECG from the closest place that will do that, usually the hospital. You shouldn't be driving, they shouldn't be driving themselves either. They need to be driven to the hospital. And also the reporting requirements. So you immediately need to notify CBOS and then submit a written report within 21 days detailing the incident, the cause, and the corrective actions. And workplace electrical accidents, they need to also be reported to WorkSafe Tasmania. There is a duty to preserve the site there. You can see number 39 under the Work Health and Safety Act. So obviously if something's unsafe and you cannot preserve that site, you need to do what you've got to do to make that site safe. But yeah, you need to preserve the site until the inspector has inspected that. Okay, mandatory testing while carrying out electrical work. So AS3000 as an electrician, this is our Bible. It's got everything we need to follow in there. So under section 8, where all the mandatory tests are, it's got about visual inspections. So visual inspections should be performed before, during, and after. It is one of the mandatory tests, and it's going to pick up things like unterminated cable in a cupboard or in a roof space. Other tests aren't going to pick that up. It's also going to pick up, you're not going to see through sheets once the wall is sheeted. So obviously before that, during the job, you can see the cables are run correctly down a internal wall or something like that. So should always be doing that visual inspection. All right, that was part 2. Moving on to part 3. So legalities to factor in the completion of the job. Just gonna have a drink, sorry guys. All right, mandatory testing prior to energizing a circuit. So as AS3000 says, section 8, prior to placing an electrical installation or any part thereof in service, it shall be verified. So that means you must do it. They are classed as the mandatory tests. So it is not maybe, it is a shall. So the mandatory tests are in section 8, as I said, and they consist of visual inspection, earth continuity, IR, polarity, and correct circuit connections, earth fault loop impedance, and then RCD, operations of RCD. So you can see here the sequence recommended by AS3000 on your testing. So obviously earth resistance, continuity, earth continuity there, through to insulation resistance, down to testing of polarity and correct circuit connections, fault loop impedance, and then verification of operation of RCDs. On the right here, it's one of Master Electrician's favorite standards. It tells you how to do all the tests. So AS3017 tells you how to complete all the mandatory tests in AS3000 section 8. It's a step-by-step guide, all different configurations, single phase, 3-phase, energized, de-energized tests. It's got every single test you need to do in there. It's a step-by-step guide. So you can see there, step 1, step 2, do this, step 3. It even tells you what reading your meter should be set at. And then it tells you where to put the probes and what test results you're getting. This is included in membership with us. I highly recommend going and having a look at this, giving it to your apprentices if you've got apprentices, but AS3017, step-by-step guide on every mandatory test you need to do. Are you leaving unfinished work in a safe manner? So obviously, if you need to leave site, you need to leave it in a safe way. So terminate any exposed conductors, lock out, tag out, put labels on it so people know where you're at. If you've got a handover, if you're handing over to another team, you need to tell them where you're up to, what they need to do to make this, to finish the work, and do it in a safe manner. So yeah, don't leave site and just, cables hanging out anywhere. You've got to make it safe to leave site. Obviously, we can't always finish a job in one day, so just need to be managing that. It is in the code of practice there, so on how to leave the work safe in a safe manner. Notification and record keeping. So certain electrical work in Tassie requires a certificate of electrical compliance. You can see there on the left, not a great photo, but that is what you need to fill in. This must be provided to TechSafe Australia within 3 days of energising the work. A full description of what work is notifiable can be found through the CBOS website, but it does include things like a new or replacement switchboard or an LV, a low voltage installation that is energised for the first time. The person responsible for the electrical work, as you can see there, must keep that a record of that for at least 10 years. You must also give a copy of the record of the electrical work to your customer. And the CEC can either be submitted via email, which is a CBOS preferred option, or obviously send it in snail mail. So I believe CBOS are looking at an electronic version of this. I think it's still in the very early stages, but a lot of other states have electronic versions now, and they've got rid of the books totally. Test results and record keeping. So the regulations do not stipulate that test results must be kept or recorded. However, master electricians advice, we always advise you record your test results. If something was to happen in the future, if there was an incident or you needed evidence, you will have a record of that and a way to follow that up. In WA, in Western Australia, it is mandatory to keep your test results and put them on your certificates, which are submitted to the regulator. So for me, that I think other states will soon follow within the next few years. So good idea to get in the habit. And as I said, it's good if there was an incident or event down the future for your records, you can bring those test results up. You can see here on the right, we've just got a little checklist we provide to our members. I've heard of some members laminating that, putting it in the van, using a little whiteboard marker after they finish, and just ticking off that they've done all the mandatory tests. So they are mandatory tests. You should be doing all these. And here we are. So basically, TechSafe have just released the most common defects. So this is from the last year, but it's only recently come out. So the top 3 defects for that reporting period: fire protective measures. So cable entries into switchboards not adequately fire sealed. So any hole over 5 mil going into a switchboard needs to be sealed with a fire sealant. So that was in the top 3. That's been in the top 3 for the last 3 years. Then we find installation work practice. So equipment not fixed properly, poor access, or not installed as per manufacturer's instructions. Also on the top 3 for the last 3 years. And then down to underground cable location. So cable routes not marked on a plan of the switchboard. So normally, I'm sure we've all turned up to sites with no underground cable route on the switchboard, but a lot of times it's just written on the switchboard lid or on the side of the switchboard. So that's also been in the top 3 defects for the last 3 years. And then we come to other frequent defects. So you can see here, earth electrode not installed in correct location, conductive building materials not earth. So that was common in steel framed homes. So inspectors turning up and finding a steel framed home not earthed. And then electrical equipment not installed in accordance with manufacturer's instructions, so often related to ovens and cooktops. then you see the note down the bottom. So the top 10 defects account for 47% of all residential defects in 2024. And then this stat below that is quite alarming. So 24%, so almost a quarter of inspected CECs had at least one defect. A quarter of all inspected CECs had at least one defect. That is massive. And that's up from 11% last reporting period. So that's a big jump. And yeah, something to be aware of. Just make sure you're covering all your bases. You're doing all your tests. Have a look. These defects have been published on the CBOS website. Just go have a look at that and make sure you're doing them all, because you don't want to be pulled up by that. Then, oh, I did have one. Sorry, I'm just trying to find. There is a couple for solar as well. I'm trying to find my notes. So they've also released stats on solar installations and commercial industrial installations. So the most common solar installation defect for the last 3 years was the failure to provide a solar system layout plan as required under AS 5033. And then commercial industrial installations. So the most common defect for that was cable entries into switchboards not being adequately fire sealed. So that is the same as residential as well. That brings me to the end of that. Have we had any questions, Sean, come through?
Yeah, there was some about apprentice supervision. I think it's answered.
Okay.
Did Glenn, did you have any other questions regarding that?
So I'm just trying to read.
I think you're talking about that situation where the apprentice you spoke about that got the shock, didn't have direct supervision, but he was only he was only terminating.
Yeah, so it was
GPO.
de-energized, so not required for. I don't know the full ins and outs of that. That was just the story I heard from.
But the task he was doing didn't require the direct supervision there. It was just broad, providing he had adequate training and information.
Yeah, exactly. The problem was he wasn't locked out. He wasn't locked on, I guess. And there was no positive communications either. So basically 2 failures there. Anything else we got through?
There's one that's just come through, which says 240 volts on mobile fleet. Does this fall under prescribed electrical work?
I would say it would. Any 240 volt. Depends on the work as well. So not everything is notifiable. It also depends on what that was, but just from that information provided, I would say yes.
Thank you, Mick. We'll just give it another couple of minutes for the questions to come through. Feel free to type up your questions in the chat box, and we'll have Mick and Sean help you with the answers. While we wait for the questions, guys, I was wondering if there are any commonly asked questions that make your way that you'd probably like to share with our attendees.
Do you have any, Sean? I guess for me, there's a lot around apprentice supervision. People are quite shocked that direct supervision is a requirement for basically all first and second years, and even up to fourth years for that energized work. So testing and stuff that comes up a lot. So go have a look at the occupational licensing, I think it's called, on the CBOS website. You should be able to find it. Occupational licensing, so the supervision of prescribed work, code of practice 2022. So there's a lot of information in there. Obviously, I discussed the different types of supervision as well, but the guide I showed was only 1 page of 5 pages. So it's a good guide. Sorry, I'm getting called. It is a good guide, and it basically can sort of teach you how to manage it, but you also need to be assessing your apprentice competency for that. So, you know, if it's if they're a 4th year, but it's the first time they've done that task, they're still going to need direct supervision for that.
Thank you, Mick. We've got another question that's come through. It says, can you describe how we would ensure competency of electricians?
So it comes back to one of those first slides there. So just because your tradesman is licensed doesn't mean they're competent to do the job. So basically, you need to be doing competency audits on your workers. That can be as simple, you know, go out and document something on your notes on your phone, watch them do the job, make sure they're competent to do it. So if you're doing a switchboard upgrade, just, you know, go there for 10 minutes and make sure they understand what they're doing and how to do it. Just make sure they're competent in the job. Ask them a few questions, and yeah, just document that down.
Even when you're onboarding staff, we generally advise them to show me how to lock out and tag out, show me your testing procedures, and go through it and conduct that audit that way before you send them out.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, so you've just got to, as I said, just because you're licensed does not mean you're competent to do the job. So it does come back to you as a PCBU or the employer. That is your responsibility as well.
Thank you, guys. I think there's something else that has come through. It says, we always had issues having even qualified electricians complying with the different arc flash ratings, where the requirement was full Zoot. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. Zoot suites, that is full body head protection.
Yeah, so 4836, table 11.2 from memory has some guidance on what arc flash rated gear is required for those tasks. Definitely read through that.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, he says there we've had issues having qualified electricians complying with that. That is your responsibility as the employer to make sure your employees comply with the safety directions you've given them.
Thanks, guys. One more question here. It says, how do you audit properly if you're not experienced in electrical? For example, site manager with carpentry trade background.
Well, I would say you're probably not qualified to do a competency audit. You'd have to be competent in the task yourself to be able to be performing that audit on someone.
Thank you, Meg. We might just give it another minute or two. I guess that's it then. We're rolling towards the wrap up. Was there anything else that?
No, it's a bit faster than we thought, but that's all good. Feel free to jump in a question, another 30 seconds, but yeah. Thank you, Sonia, for having us. I hope everyone got something out of it. Also, I'll be down doing in-person events of this end of October. So I'm in Launceston and Hobart. I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but it'd be good to see you in person where you can grab a CPD point as well. There's some other good events as well.
There has been one
Glenn's
last
just come
question
in.
that seeps through. Yes.
Yep.
Restricted electrical licenses, is that still a thing?
That is still a thing, yes. So that is, you can look at that on the CBOS website. There are restricted electrical licenses for various things. If I can find the slide, I can probably go back to it. What number was it? Yeah, so this is the slide here. So this is taken from the CBOS website. So you can see there are restricted electrical work license, so refrigeration and aircon, water heaters, things like that, instrumentation and control.
Lovely, thank you, Mick. We have another one. I guess, yeah, we can keep at it still. It says, how regular should existing residence switchboards be checked?
Sean?
Oh, I'd be tripping the RCBO probably every 6 months.
So for that's a safety switch,
Like a health check.
RCBO, RCD. Yeah, good to check that. There's just a test button there. That's a good way to check your RCDs.
Check that's operating. Yeah.
Make sure you've got safety switches. Some of the older homes will not have that unless they've had work done. It is a requirement if you're adding anything to a circuit
Additional,
which
yep.
doesn't have an RCD to put one on, so safety switch on that. But yeah, just how long's a piece of string? It basically, how old's the house? What condition is the switchboard in? Things like that. But yeah, as Sean said, probably every 6 months be testing that test button on your RCD or safety switch.
Lovely, thank you, Mick. Anything else that you'd like to add, Sean, before we wrap up?
No, not really. Just make sure your apprentices are part of that lockout tagout procedure. Pretty simple procedure to follow. I had 3 calls 2 weeks ago in regards to apprentice getting a shock. So really got to take the time and train apprentices, because they're only as good as the guy supervising them and training them. So.
Yep, with Sean, as I said, we've been going around the country talking to quite a lot of apprentices. A lot don't have their own lock. They should all have their own lock, and at least their own lock, and better yet, a lockout kit as well. But every time they're working on a circuit with their tradesman, they should be locking on as well.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today.
No worries. Thanks for having us, Sonia.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries at all. No, cool, good. I guess this brings us to the end. Just wanted to let you know this event is run as part of the WorkSafe Tasmania month. So please head to the worksafe.tas.gov.au/month to find out what other webinars and in-person events we have in store. As Mick mentioned, he's also presenting in Launceston in a few of the in-person sessions that we have. So feel free to log on to the website and look at things that you may be interested in. There will also be a survey link towards the end of this session. We would love to hear your feedback. So please give us your feedback, and yeah, we'll get some more meaningful WHS work out of it. Again, it's been an absolute pleasure to have both of you join us for the webinar today. And thank you to all of the attendees for joining in. Have a great rest of the day and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya.